Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Brian Lipp with Sales for Life. Thanks so much for stopping by today. We're going to have a discussion on building a world-class account-based sales development team, and I'm really excited to have some great guests with us today that will help us along this journey. When we think about account-based sales development, recently Corporate Executive Board has found that there is now 6.8 buyers on the average B2B buying committee. And with buying teams getting larger, more complex, and the number of prospecting channels continuing to increase, many sales teams are really looking to optimize their account-based sales development strategy. And I'm really pleased today to introduce Jon Miller, the CEO and co-founder of Engagio, the account-based everything platform. Prior to working with Engagio, he was the VP marketing and co-founder at Marketo, and he's been named one of the top 10 CMOs for companies under $250,000 in revenue. He has a bachelor in physics and an MBA from Stanford. Welcome, Jon. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having us. Super excited to talk about account-based sales development.
Yeah, for sure. Also joining us today is your colleague, Danilo Nikolich. He's the head of account development at Engagio. Over his career, he's built some world-class account development teams with companies like Marketo, also PeopleSoft and Symantec. And he's really passionate about perfecting process, messaging, training, and delivering exceptional results. So I'm really pleased to have some real experts with us today. And as we go through this talk, make sure you pay attention and engage with us because we are recording it. You can absolutely receive a copy of the slides, and we're happy to answer your questions throughout the talk. And don't hesitate to create some engagement on Twitter. You can see the hashtag ABSD. As we go through the chat today, there's really 4 areas we're going to be looking at. First of all, 4 foundations for account-based sales development excellence: the people, the process, technology, and the focus that we'll really need to be successful. What are the habits, routines, and characteristics of top-performing sales development reps? And how do we really enable personalization at scale in order to really drive the amount of impact that we're looking for? And of course, in order to learn and optimize, we need to measure our performance. So we'll also go through some best practices associated with measurement. With that, I will pass it over to our 2 experts that'll take us through the chat. And again, don't hesitate to ask questions throughout, and we'll also have some questions at the end of the session.
Great. Thank you very much. So, we're going to really begin kind of, first by just talking about kind of the new sales development. Let's get our screen share working here. Perfect. All right, so that fancy transition there is called the vortex, and that's how we'll know we're kind of going on, to kind of, new topics here. So I'm going to kick things off here, and then we'll have Danilo kind of give some commentary, and then he'll really be leading the section around kind of building the team. But let's go back to my days at Marketo, where I was the CMO. I also built and managed the sales development team, at Marketo. And together, we built a revenue engine that was really powerful. It drove as much as 80% of all the deals that the sales team closed. And the model we built was driven by content and inbound marketing, and then taking those and doing lead nurturing and lead scoring. Sorry about that. Lead nurturing, lead scoring, and then getting the good ones over to sales. And this was very much like fishing with a net. We didn't care which specific fish we caught. We just cared, did we catch enough total fish? Mm-hmm. But what happened at Marketo is we wanted to, inbound wasn't enough. We needed to get more, and even more importantly, we ended up wanting to go up market. And we identified named accounts in the enterprise. And it turned out that model of net fishing didn't work. Those big companies just didn't happen to swim into our net. And we needed to find new ways to reach out to them. We had to actually build an outbound sales development team and put in place new processes for marketing and selling to these larger companies. It was much more akin to fishing with spears. And so what we've learned in the last 5 years in the sales development function is the value of specialization. You have inbound SDRs and you have outbound SDRs. You have people who respond to nets. You have people who are spears. But the world's even more complicated than that because, as Brian said a second ago, the size of the buying teams are getting bigger, and it's more complicated. At the biggest enterprises, there can be more than a dozen people involved in the decision, and as a result, this has some big implications in terms of the sales development process. First and foremost, something that I think every sales development person needs to recognize.
Oh, I will. Let me go get my stuff. Okay.
Hey, we can hear you guys. Something that every sales development person should recognize is that it's too easy for any one person to say no when you're working in an account, or just to be on vacation. It's too easy for one person to ignore you. You have to be working more than one person in the account to maximize your success. And that's true whether you're following up on an inbound lead or prospecting outbound. Just because a junior person came by your booth at a trade show doesn't mean that that's the only person from that company you should call, right? You need to be looking across the account. And the advantage of this is you're reaching higher and more strategically into the organization and ultimately driving more valuable deals. So if you put these two ideas together, outbound spear fishing and complex, multi-person accounts, you have the rise of what Topo has called account-based sales development. And they've researched it and said that turns out this approach of outbound account-based sales development is the most effective account-based tactic available to you. In the marketing land, marketers are all, aflutter talking about account-based marketing, and that's all well and good, but the real ROI, what really matters, is account-based sales development. Put another way, account-based sales development is the tip of the spear fishing. So to formally define what we're talking about here, account-based sales development is a coordinated strategy that combines personalized, multi-channel, multi-threaded outbound activities to create high-value opportunities at new and existing customers.
Hey, John, sorry to interrupt. Can you just make sure that you minimize your control panel there? It's just taking up a bit of the screen real estate.
Got it.
Perfect.
Is that better?
Thanks. Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Okay. So, let's, in that definition of account-based sales development, you can read the slide about what it is, but, I want to point out what it's not. This is not Aaron Ross's predictable revenue, where you send out an email to 1,000 people asking them who's responsible for purchasing some customer support software, and trying to get it, networked to the same person. It's not blasting out emails on behalf of your sales team. It's not about measuring people on call volume, on number of emails sent and activity. It is about focusing your time and your effort on the accounts that matter and using that focus to spend more time researching it and being more relevant, and more relevant is ultimately driving what I call challenger sales style conversations that are more effective to actually achieve your goal. And as a result, you're getting into more strategic, bigger deals. That's what we're talking about with account-based sales development here. So Danilo, we hired you to come join Engagio to lead our account-based sales development function. You've been doing this for a long time. Tell me kind of, about your view of what's going on with account-based sales development.
Yeah, so I've been doing it for, roughly going on 16 years, so dating myself a little bit here. But the reason, I've stayed in this for 16 years is, I'm very passionate about it, right? So the quote on the screen that you guys see, I'm sure it's circulated around LinkedIn and a number of different areas. So, I'm going to take us from that 30,000-foot view all the way up to that booming voice in the sky, right? So when I think about a couple things, when I either inherit an SDR team or I'm building it from scratch is really around two different things, right? So number one is, I see my team as ambassadors for our company, right? So what does that mean, right? If you think about the outreach, we may be that first voice that they hear, right? We may be that first written communication that goes out to the customer. So what I want to make sure that they're coming back with is, hey, this is a company that's easy to do business with. This is a company I want to partner with, right? And then the second thing, besides the ambassador piece is, and we're very fortunate here at Engagio that we have this, is a career path for the SDR team, right? So what I mean by that is we have a spot where we want to train our folks, develop them right off the bat, so when they're ready to make that move to an account executive role, they're ready, right? So that doesn't start with, them applying for the role. That starts off right off the bat, and that's why I think training of the sales development is absolutely critical. It's a must. Now, the other thing that I wanted to touch on as it relates to, account development, as we refer to it, is this concept of teamwork, right? And I found this image out there. I think it's hilarious because it really represents the difference between sales development and a sales team, right? So look at the kid on the left-hand side. That's your sales development rep sitting there alone. It's, doing his own thing. The person on the right-hand side is your sales rep, right? Now, I know you're looking at the screen, you're saying, okay, well, which one is it? I don't care. Pick one. I'm trying to make a point here, right? So what I'm trying to say is if you think about your top sales guys out there, what do they do best, right? They use every single resource at their disposal. So if your sales rep is number 13, number 14 is your CEO. It's Jon, right? And you're pulling Jon into a crucial deal that you're trying to close, right? You want that executive sponsorship. The person on the right-hand side could be your VP of products that is brought in to talk about the roadmap, right? So why is it any different when we talk about the sales development organization? It shouldn't be, right? So what I'll talk about later on during this webinar is how do you turn that process around and actually have that team approach in your sales development organization. So Jon, over back to you.
Yeah, I mean, where I net all that out, the promise of account-based sales development is that we're going to make the sales development function actually be strategic in the organization.
Absolutely,
right?
right?
It's not about just having, hey, how many emails can you blast out, right? It's, that these sales development reps or account development reps, as we call them, are actually an integral strategic part of the sales team.
Absolutely.
And that's going to require building the team well, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yep.
But let's take into the second process here, which is people and process. And I'm actually going to focus first on the process side of things. What does it mean to do account-based sales development well? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's not this. So, we all have our inboxes flooded these days with these sort of sales emails. This one here we're looking at is just pretty obvious that this person did not spend a lot of time to really research me and my business. Here's another one, that, maybe at least, doesn't have that kind of error, although there is a typo in this guy's title at the bottom. But the thing about this email is you could, change the word saw Engagio with saw some other company and send the exact same email out. That's lazy on your part, and it wastes my time. And to make matters worse, a couple days later, 5 days later, he sends me this crap, which is even more generic. At least he fixed the typo in his title. By the way, we have an ebook on our website all about, crappy cold emails, if you want to see dozens more of examples like this. But when I get any of this crap, I do what probably you do, which is I opt out, I tune out, I toss out. I hit the spam button, and I make it impossible for you not to reach me ever again, but even to reach and make it harder for you to kind of reach anybody else. And 10 years ago, our inboxes were flooded with marketing spam, And then spam filters figured out how to block that crap. And just because, sales development reps figured out a workaround that they could send these, quote unquote personal emails to get around the spam filters, you're naive to think that that's going to keep working and that the spam filters won't figure out a way to block, the sales spam, which is just cluttering our inboxes. We've got to find a way to do better. We are reaching to the important people at our important accounts, and the risk of them hitting the spam button is too high. We've got to find a way to increase our odds of getting a response from these strategic people. Put another way, this is not a numbers game where you can send out 100 emails and be happy with 3 responses. You should look at that as the fact that you just annoyed 97 of your target customers, right? We got to do better. How do we do better? Well, we do better by doing what at Engagio we call a play. And a play is a coordinated, orchestrated series of interactions that span multiple people at the target account and multiple departments and people and channels at your company to achieve a goal, whether it's getting a meeting or moving a deal forward or taking a customer, to the next stage. By mapping out your plays in advance, it's a way to ensure that all your reps are following the best practices and that they're coordinating the work across your organization. A good play works across multiple channels: email, phone, voice, direct mail, bringing marketing channels into the equation. It also has multiple touches over time. It has touches across people, and it really makes sure that all the right people are doing all the right things. You'll notice I'm using a football analogy here with the coach with the X's and the O's. That's the single most important takeaway of what a successful play is. We're not talking about one SDR prospecting to one person. We've got 11 people on my team and 11 people on your team, and a play lines them all up. So that's what we're talking about is a good play. There's a lot of stuff out there on the internet these days that you can find from sales automation vendors that kind of tell you what a great sequence or cadence might look like. But what these all have in common is that they're one person to one person, meaning they're not account-based. They are email and phone only, so they're not multi-channel. They're not bringing in marketing. They're not bringing in the rest of your team from sales, and so on. And then they're, in many cases, they're not relevant and personalized. And as a result, you're just doing more sales spam faster. That's not what we need to do in account-based sales development. What we want to aspire to is something that looks a little bit more like this.
John, before you jump into that, if we go back to that previous slide, look, if you just take a look at this at a high level, right? I'm a guy that always likes to step back and look at things at 30,000 feet. You have an assembly line here, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about 3 different variables here, right? You talked about this, John, saying time is one of them. Number of touches is another one. And the third one is just simply a sequence of those touches, right? So there's not a whole lot of imagination here. And, if you think about your sales approach, the last thing in the world you'd want your sales guys doing is, treating a deal as an assembly line, right? So,
yeah. So we sort of said, well, what does a good play look like? This is just the beginning of a play, but if you look across the bottom, you'll see, first of all, we're not reaching out to one person, we're reaching out to multiple personas, at the target account. You'll see we're using different channels, of course: email, phone, research, sending, direct mail, coffee gift cards, kind of, and so on. But the point that I really want to make here that's going on, which is cool, is that the interactions are coming from multiple people at our company, whether it's an SDR, doing the research and doing the phone call, or the head of sales sending an email, or me as the CEO approving an email that somebody else drafted, but to the CEO of the target company. or the AE kind of getting involved. The SDR is the coach. The SDR is the orchestra conductor. That's sort of making sure that the different people are doing the right thing at the right time, for moving the play forward. This is so much more powerful. Think about it. If you can connect with the CEO of a target company, you're golden, right? That's what you're trying to achieve. But the CEO is not going to respond to an email from a random SDR. The CEO very well may respond to an email from another CEO if it's actually relevant research, email that contains ideas that are valuable to their business. So that's what we're trying to achieve from a process perspective.
And if I could just add to this, right? If you step back and you take a look at this and you say, okay, so what is the outcome of this, right? The outcome is going to be the initiation of a sales cycle, right? That could be a meeting that happens. Think about how powerful that meeting is going to be compared to something that's coming from a 1-to-1 ratio, right?
Great point.
Because what happens with the sales rep when they start off that meeting? They're like, hey, it was a great initial call. Now we need to get to this person or we need to get to that person. Well, guess what? You've jump-started that process already because you've reached out to all of those personas in advance. So when the sales cycle starts, everybody that you're targeting within that organization as a sales rep is going to be aware.
That's a great point. Now, this is hard. It's a different way of hiring and training SDRs.
It is.
So let's talk about how we do that on the people side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a billing perspective, right, I'm going to start here with execution, and I'm just going to pose a question out there, for the audience, right? This is a question I ask myself frequently, and I think everybody out there should ask the same question is your team commoditized, right? And so how do you figure that out, right? So I'll give you guys a couple of hints. I've had this situation happen to me in previous roles. The VP of sales walks in and says, hey, what templates are you guys using? And if you do have an answer for him, you're in trouble. The other thing that
why are you in trouble?
So you're in trouble because you're using templates. You're not personalizing it, right?
Yep.
So if you have an answer, start thinking about, how do I get out of that, right? And another thing is, I'm sure you guys look at your competitors. You go to their website, you fill out a form, you get an email template back from them. How closely does that email template resemble what your folks are sending out, right? So a couple of gut checks there, from a commoditization perspective, right? If your guys are making 60 to 100 calls a day and sending out a couple hundred emails, you're probably commoditized, right? So let me step back out of that and talk about a couple things here that you guys see on the screen. For me, number one, when you're training a sales development rep is make sure that they're organized, right? Make sure they understand, what they're going to be doing for that week or that particular day, right? It doesn't have to be a long, arduous process. It could be a quick 5-minute check-in. What accounts are you targeting this week? Why? What's your process, right? And then, when we talk about a process, what I'm referring to here is really going after that account-based approach, right? So John talked a little bit about it. I talked a little bit about it. I'm not going to, go into it here ad nauseum, but you got to think about how many people within that organization are your folks going after. What's the process that they're using to go after those folks? And how effective is it, right? When we talk about number of touches, right, this is one of those things that, you have a ton of blogs out there. And I recently read one that said it takes 9.3 touches to reach a prospect. So what happens out there? I think you saw that slide out there showed 12 touches as an example of a company that uses it out there. To me, that's really just subscribing to mediocrity. Right? If the average is 9.3 touches, don't build your process around that, right? If the average is 9.3, there's people that are doing it in 4 or 5 touches. Figure out how do you minimize the amount of touches and create a more efficient approach as it relates to your model rather than going after mediocrity. And then the last bullet here really quickly is just weekly check-ins, right? So for me, you want to make sure You inspect what you expect, right? So it's a quick touch on a regular basis. Now, John, why don't you take this slide here?
Well, I think so the next thing we get into is what are you going to be telling the team to do? How are you going to be measuring it? I think, in the net fishing world of Marketo, we grew up in a world of BANT, right? Where something was an opportunity where we were driving towards a project in the next 6 months, and so we tried to have the SDRs qualify against budget authority need timing. And then outbound account-based sales development world, though, that's not the right goal to hold the ADR team to. What we're trying to do here is get our salespeople in front of the right executive to have a challenger sales style conversation. And the goal, therefore, is to just get a meeting with the right person at the right company. And so I think it's really important, if you're going to embrace this, to change what you define as a qualified, sales accepted lead that you pass to sales, and ultimately change how you measure and compensate the ADR team.
Absolutely. So, I'd like to add to this. I mean, I've done this role probably at 8 different companies, and, it really depends on the maturity, right? And depends on what the sales need is. One of the companies I worked for, we had a competitor that pretty much we were trying to displace in every single account. So to your point, John, all we wanted to do is really create that captive audience, yep. Right? They could be absolutely screaming, saying, nope, 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 and we'll convince them to take that meeting, and that's what they wanted. So they wanted those at-bats. Absolutely. So let's take a look at the structure, right? So we talked again, we're going to keep reiterating this concept of account-centric versus lead-centric, and I'll give you an example of what's happened to me in the past. I had a couple of my folks that were chasing down a number of leads, and they would prosecute this lead at pound it for about 6 or 7 touches, and what would happen is they would just close it out at that point. So in our review, I would sit down and I would say, hey, have you clicked on find duplicates? Have you gone into the account? Have we actually talked to these people in the past? Do we have any contacts out there, right? And so, I had to retrain my guys without actually having a platform that supports account-based, in Salesforce to really think outside that box. Think about the account. That's who we're selling to, yep. Right? The other question that I get a lot out there, and this is something that I wanted to bring up in this webinar, is what is that ideal SDR to AE ratio, right? So it really depends on the maturity. In my opinion, I don't think you should stretch it anywhere past 1-to-3 ratio. If you go outside of that 1-to-3 ratio, you're really spreading your SDR really thin. They don't have enough time to engage into those accounts. They don't have enough time to really strategize with the AEs, right? So that's my recommendation from that perspective. Goals and performance management. I almost feel like, when you sit down with marketing and sales, you have to have some sort of a model that you guys review on a regular basis, right? So that could be your simple, account to bookings conversion model, right? How many accounts do you need to touch to get a meeting? How many meetings turn into ops, and so on and so forth. If you build that out, it's not something that is in concrete and stone. It's just a model that you can actually review on a regular basis and make sure you're making tweaks to improve upon it, right? That's the goal here, is not to set something that you don't have to change. It's just one of those things that you want to keep an eye on. And then from a compensation standpoint, I think about it in a couple different ways, right? I really want the compensation to drive focus, right? That's what it's really all about, right? And you can have a simple comp model that takes, a couple of variables into account, like a meeting, ops, calls, whatever you want to look at. Or you can think about more complex model that involves for example, like a point system that has a mix of multiple parameters with applicable lengths. So in the past, I've done size of company, industry, title, for example, comping somebody more on a CXO meeting versus a director versus a manager. Okay? So let's talk about recruiting, right? I mean, the big thing here, and I'll move on for the sake of time, is you always need to be hiring, right? Whether you have an open position or not, it doesn't really matter. You should be always on LinkedIn, talking to everybody out there in your network. And I have a long commute, so I use my commute hours to do informational calls. So I'll reach out to folks that have 6 or 9 months experience that may be ready in about 3 or 4 months to make that move and start having those conversations. Now, in terms of the background, what do you look for, right? How much experience do you really need, right? I know a lot of my colleagues really look for the college grad. They want to have somebody that is fresh, that they can mold, and perhaps they look at things like, is their family member in sales and that sort of thing. For me, I like folks with active LinkedIn profiles. So I'll view a few candidates. If I see a view back or they really engage on LinkedIn, those are the folks that I really like to go after. And one tip before we move on from this slide is look at sales reps in other industries. They want to break into high tech, but it's hard, right? So some of the folks that I've looked and hired came from banking, they came from pharmaceutical sales, they came from real estate, right? So don't neglect those folks. There's a lot of really talented sales reps out there that are trying to make a move into high tech. Now, when it comes to the phone screen, right, that's the first, step for me, because I want to make sure that this person has, this is a job that involves obviously being on the phone. So I want to make sure it's someone that has call control, tone, they're closing for next steps, they're confident. And I like them to really pitch me on the product. Now, if you have a recent college grad and they don't have any experience, maybe have them talk about something that they're passionate about, right? And ask him the same question multiple times, right? Why are you interested? Well, Engagio is a great company, and I read a lot about you. Keep asking the same question. See if you can get them to really think on their feet, right? And then the way I wrap this up is I wrap it up with giving them enough time to ask questions. And sometimes I just make it very uncomfortable for them. And so what I mean by that is I'll sit there and I'll say, okay, next question. Okay, what other questions? Until they get to a point where they're like, well, that's pretty much all I had. And then I'll give them some feedback. I'll say, okay, well, look, I like you. We're going to bring you on site. Make sure you come prepared with way more questions than what you asked me today, right? So I'm giving them a chance to show me that they're coachable, right? So I'm bringing them on site. That's the first thing I'm testing for, right? Did they come prepared this time to ask a bunch of questions? Or is it just a 1 or 2 question answer? The other thing is, look, you're dealing with a lot of young folks out there, and they're nervous when they come in. So what happens a lot of times is you get some ramblers, right? Don't give up on those folks. Give them the benefit of the doubt and give them some coaching right off the bat and see if they adopt it, right? So I'll interrupt somebody. I'll say, look, you're rambling on. You're going off on tangents. Why don't you just give me some more succinct, answers, and let's see how they do, right? Knowledge retention is critical for me as well. I like to, jump in, and be interviewer number 4, and really get a sense for how much information from the other interviewers are they able to retain. And then I ask some questions around team player, what it means to them, and I really look for examples, right? I keep pushing them on that, okay? Now, once you actually wrap up that on-site, the next step is, for me, is get some writing samples, right? I mean, Jon and I talked about this so far. A lot of times because of this commoditization, people just send out templates. They don't even know how to write. So that's something that I really like to test for. Now, I ask for 3 or 4 samples, custom samples that they've sent in the past. If it's the recent college grad, again, what you want to do is maybe ask them, what have you learned during the interview process? Give them some structure in terms of what your expectation is for that writing sample. And then, the other thing that I've done in the past is I've sent sales assessments, like Sales Drive, for example, to the candidates just to get a sense for what their profile is. Now, don't go too crazy on this. I've seen SDR managers say, well, you scored really low on that assessment. It's just a data point. But it's an important one that's going to give you some information about your candidate that maybe you can follow up with another phone call and talk about, right? Now we're getting to the point where you want to send that offer out. Before you send that offer out, I'm going to give you a tip here. Set some clear expectations. What you're going to do with this candidate over the next, month or two is invest a lot of time. You're going to really spend some time training them. So look, you got to set some expectations for them as well, right? You want to make sure that they understand moving in what is expected of them, right? I'm expecting you to participate actively during this training. I want to make sure you're passing the new hire certification. I want to make sure you're hitting your ramp goals, right? And it really sets the precedent for the candidate before they even set, first step into your building, right? Now let's talk about the onboarding, right? I usually develop a SDR playbook, and I'll show you guys a sample agenda here in a second in terms of what that should look like. Typically, it's 1 to 3 weeks, right? We have a new hire certification at the end of that, along with a joint calling session with myself. I like to do a buddy program, so pick a top SDR out there, have them shadow them for a month or so, and then of course ongoing coaching. And this is what the sample agenda looks like, right? So it talks about at a high level what the market looks like. I've read some blogs out there that people talk about really just doing hands-on training as it relates to the job. That's a given, right? I like to start off with what does the market look like, right? You want to make sure that besides the persona training that you do, which is a given, you educate them on the space itself. So when the customers or the prospects throw something out of left hand, they have a sense of where that's coming from and the context behind it, right? Absolutely critical.
Cool.
I know it's going fast there.
No, it's
hopefully,
good. It's a wealth of information about building and managing and growing an account-based sales development team, or put it another way, an account development team, if you will. I alluded to this sort of last topic earlier. When you move to qualification using meetings and not bands opportunities, you measure things differently, and so on. So, a couple things that make this account-based measurement world different. So the first is it's not about the MQL anymore. Partly this is my fault from Marketo, where we told people this was the way to do it, but there are so many teams out there that live or die by the MQL. How many MQLs? Are the MQLs up? Are the MQLs down? Are the MQLs any good? The problem with the MQL is, by definition, it's one person. It's a marketing qualified lead. And what we want to live in is a world of marketing qualified accounts, where we're looking at, is this the right account? Is that account engaging with us, not just from one person, but are we getting engagement from the right people? And is it across the account? And is the right depth of engagement? And then when we see an MQA, as I said at the beginning, don't just follow up on the one person, follow up with the account. So that's first and foremost. Looking at MQAs, you're looking at the conversion rate of MQAs to meetings, not of MQLs to opportunities. Second, and I know this is hard, but every SDR manager I've ever talked to, Danilo, you and I talk about this, focuses a lot on activity. Got to get the call volume up. Got to get the email volume up. And I get it. Hard work matters and activity matters. But at the same time, if you focus exclusively on quantity, you're incenting your people to send out sales spam, or to just call people without even doing the research about who are you calling. And so you have to find metrics that measure not just quantity, but also some indication of quality. And how good is that email? How relevant is the email? Did the email get a human response rate? Is one of my favorite metrics. Because obviously that Remember, for everyone you don't get a response, is somebody the target that ignored you or hit the spam button. And then lastly, in account-based sales development, you're looking at impact and influence, not trying to claim credit. What I mean by that is this is not a world where you say, well, that's a marketing generated deal and this is a sales development generated deal. You don't kind of figure out who got that deal because you're working as a team every step of the way. Marketing sent a direct mail package and bought ads, against that account. Sales development sent emails and made phone calls, but the executives got involved too. So the team created that opportunity. And one of the ways you can kind of look at impact and influence is by tracking your engagement from the account. Is that account engaging with you, and is that engagement going up or down over time? Now, at Engagio, we like to track engagement using time. An account or a person that spends more time with you is an account or person that is more engaged with you. And before somebody spends money with you, they're going to spend time with you. And so we track the number of minutes of engagement that we get by person and by account. And what you want is charts that look like the one on the right here. That's actually our data that shows across our target accounts the increase in engagement minutes, that we've had from our activities. Of course, June and July always kind of drop in the summertime, but then strong finish at the end. And then these heat maps tell you where's that engagement coming from, by persona, or even at a given account, where is it coming from, within an account. And this tells you the information you need to know, is my account-based sales development working? Am I building engagement and ultimately relationships with the right people at the accounts that matter? So that's kind of my thoughts on measurement. Sorry. What are your thoughts, Danilo?
Yeah, I want to echo that. Absolutely. I mean, that previous slide was powerful because it, showed you engagement by role as well, right? Because if you think about it, you could be involved at a, manager level, but, you're in trouble because you don't have any engagement at any of the other levels like a CXO or a VP level. But, for me, I want to echo that sentiment, right? It's not like you're completely going to ignore, the calls, the connects, the conversations and all of that. But you want to put it into perspective, right? If you're making, 60 calls, a day and you're sending 150 emails, there's just no way that from a high level view, you're going to have an understanding of how you're doing, right? For me, it's all about accounts, right? So I start off the week with how many accounts are we targeting for this week? Is it going to be 25? Is it going to be 30 accounts? And then you want to really figure out, what that conversion ratio is, right? Because to John's point earlier, when you're spraying and praying, you're getting a couple of them, but you're going to find diminishing returns, right? And you're burning the rest of it, right? So when I think about it, I think of it from a perspective of, we got 2 meetings out of 10 accounts. I'd prefer that over 3 meetings out of 50 accounts, right? Because you're burning your patch. The second thing is, I'm looking at, when we're engaging with accounts, how many folks are we engaging with, right? And not only from a perspective on our end, but also from a perspective on the customer end, right? And then research is a key component for us. So I'm not sure how many of you guys really keep track of research. We have tasks that we build into our process to keep track of any sort of LinkedIn research, blogs, and so on and so forth. So as an SDR manager, I can take a look at it and give some advice on that level, right? Other things that we use, we talked about Coffee Sender. We're starting to venture out with things like video with Vidyard, things like handwritten notes from Letterfriend, right? Back in my PeopleSoft days, that's the way we did it. We've moved so far to the right now, focusing on email, that this is now a new novel idea, right? That we tend to use. But yeah, absolutely, it's all about how many accounts and what that focus and that conversion ratio is, and how do you get better at it?
Awesome. All right, so we're in the home stretch here, everybody. The last thing that we promised you we touch base on is the technology stack for account-based sales development. And I'm gonna blow your mind with the slide here a little bit. So this is my market map for account-based sales development. You know, what it does here, just to provide some sense of the structure of what we're looking at, is, you know, the first bucket here, these are all the vendors that are going to help you with what I call the who of account-based sales development. This is which companies and which people should I be going after. It's primarily a data play, but also this is where the predictive analytics vendors go. So this ranges from anybody from, you know, Zoom Info, where you can go by contacts, to, you know, Hunter, where they can basically just guess email, you know, addresses for people you're going after. The second column here is focusing on the what. So this is, what are we going to say to these people in these accounts so that we can be actually relevant? So there's a lot more vendors here that provide insights, and there's some agencies there too. And then there's a couple vendors that can help you actually customize the content you're going to send. The biggest bucket here is the where. These are all the different ways that you're going to interact with your target accounts. The top row here are a little bit more marketing-oriented channels, whether that's ads, targeted account ads, or web personalization. Danilo gave some examples of direct mail, or events or so on. The second row is then more sales development channels, whether that's human email, you know, where you see Engagio sitting, phone and dialer, or social touches. Below the interaction channels is what I call orchestration. And orchestration is really the process of building plays. And I showed you examples of plays earlier. Plays orchestrate interactions into, you know, coordinated sequences and cadences across teams, across channels, and over time. And then last but not least, there is a set of infrastructure you're going to want, you know, across the bottom here, whether that's, you know, just lead to account matching. So that way, when you're looking at an account, you see all the people and not just the contacts. You know, routing so that the right leads get routed to the right accounts, depending on who owns them. Or some of the analytic things that we talked about to measure engagement, minutes over time, and so on. So that gives you a sense of kind of the map of all the different categories of technologies you might need and some of the players. And you see Engagio, you know, as a human email solution. We do play in the sales automation and sales email space, but we go bigger by really orchestrating into plays and providing the lead to account matching and other account-based infrastructure. If you want to learn more about account-based sales development, I've written a 140-page book that normally costs $20, but you can get it for free off of our website at engagio.com/guide. It's a fast, fun read. Highly recommend it. And then I wrap every presentation I give, and now Danilo does as well, with what I call the tweetable takeaways for anybody who's too lazy to think about what to tweet yourselves. So these are 140 character approved, ready for you to copy and run with. Just tag me, I'm at Jon Miller. That's also how you can reach me if you want to follow up with me. And Danilo, you are at, you know, on LinkedIn at Danilo Nikolich.
Yeah, feel free to reach out. I have 16 years experience doing this, and like I said, I love it. I have a huge passion for it. So if you have any questions, you know, from this webinar or in general, just reach out to me. Would love to chat.
Danilo,
Great.
Jon,
so with that, take over.
Yeah, I appreciate all the insight that you have shared. I know we're a little bit over time, but two questions I've seen come in that I thought were relevant in sharing with everyone. If you could elaborate a little bit on time horizons for success. You showed some measurement around engagement of the accounts and the journey that they're taking, but if you could share some insight into how you look at time as far as you're going after an account, how much time are you actually going to give yourself to penetrate it?
That's an excellent question. And I mean, the unfortunate reality is the answer is it depends a lot on the size of the account and the average contract value that you're looking to, you know, to drive. So, and that ultimately, that's the reason why I think it's so important that you measure engagement in addition to measuring more business-oriented outcomes like meetings and opportunities. Because it might take a long time to generate a deal when you're prospecting into General Motors, because it's a big, complicated organization. And it may even take a while before you even get a meeting. But if you can show steady increases in engagement from the right personas and the right people, that's how you're going to be able to really show that you're making progress on that journey to the deal.
Right.
So
makes sense.
I know that's maybe not the most satisfactory answer to your question, but I think it's the true answer.
Yeah, and I would echo that, right? I mean, I've been in situations where it's either a quick turnaround, and sometimes if it's a bigger account, you might want to put it on the back burner and then circle back to it, right? But it really depends, So the one thing that I would reference is what I talked about earlier, which is, just start measuring what those conversion ratios are and work on improving those, right? Because it's going to vary from company to company. So know what yours are and how you can do better against it.
Totally makes sense that you have to have indicators of success based on the complexity or the size of deal, the things that are involved in putting forward the effort that are worth your returns. Last question before we drop off. What are the most common areas people fail when they try to implement an account-based sales development strategy?
Well, the first one is directly connected to what we just talked about. If you embrace this, but you don't change your metrics, and all the other people in the company are still expecting 100 dials a day and opportunities created instantly and all that kind of stuff, you're going to run into a buzzsaw. The reality is this is about going after bigger, more strategic deals, and you want the organization's support. That it's ultimately has the best impact, but it's it is different from the more traditional way. So that's the first one. I think the other one I'll point to, and then Danilo can jump in, is a mistake in not building alignment across the organization about who the target accounts are. I've seen companies, where marketing leads the effort to identify a list of target accounts, and then they work really hard with sales development, and they get meetings at these accounts, and then they give to sales, and sales is like, yeah, I don't want that account. So if you're going to put all the effort into this, put all the wood behind the spear, make sure you're actually going after the targets that everybody wants.
Right.
Yeah,
those ideal customer profiles. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, right? I mean, I had that slide on process that said, get your head out of your process. Being a little cheeky there, but in reality, people really just get granular, like Jon was talking about in terms of the, volume of calls and number of activities and all of that, really granular information. And they don't step back and look at really what the impact is to the sales organization, right? Like Jon talked about, I mean, sales is pretty good at identifying, hey, here's our top accounts. And at the end of the day, how penetrated are you into those accounts, right? I mean, that should be one of your measurements out there, as opposed to looking at, what you're actually bringing in, right? I think there's a good quote out there by Ogilvy that says, don't count the people you reach, count the people
the
people that count, right? And that kind of really, really resonates to me. So
awesome.
Well, thanks everyone for your attendance today, and Jon, Danilo, great content. We appreciate it. Have a fantastic day, everyone. And remember, this content will be it's recorded, so you will be gaining access to it. We'll send out a communication to everyone that attended, and don't hesitate to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter. Have a fantastic day.